Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Now, let's take a look. Now, we're going to talk about what's happened today. Earlier today, former Prime Minister Datuk Sri Najib Razak was found guilty of all 7 charges of misappropriating 42 million ringgit of SRC international funds. And this evening, High Court Judge Muhammad Nazla Muhammad Ghazali sentenced Najib to 12 years in jail with 210 million ringgit fine. Now, the jail sentences will run concurrently. That's 12 years for abuse of power and 10 years each for the criminal breach of trust and money laundering charges. Now, while Najib has successfully obtained a stay of execution for his sentence, the verdict will no doubt have an impact on the political landscape. Joining us on the show tonight, we have Lembah Pantai MP Fahmi Fadzil. He's also the Communications Director for Parti Keadilan Rakyat. Fahmi, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Now, this victory, the victory of the Pakatan Harapan Coalition in 2018 had allowed for many of the previous administration to be charged for corruption, including Najib, and for his role in the 1MDB scandal. Now, I'm wondering, Fahmi, who you think can claim credit for enabling today's verdict?
Well, I think, for one, the climate post G14 allowed that process to begin. Of course, a lot of the salient points regarding the kind of problems in 1MDB began as early as around 2011, if not earlier, when I think Datuk Sri Anwar in Parliament raised the matter. But it is really I would say very valiant effort by the prosecution, and of course in this case. It's not really right to say that anyone can claim credit, but it is a marked difference, given that for the past 22-25 months, Pakatan Harapan was in power, and that allowed the process to begin.
Fahmi, of course, there are others who have been looking at the Perikatan government, the government led by Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, following the fall of the Pakatan Harapan government, and wondering about its commitment, the commitment of the Perikatan government to the very similar agendas around, fighting corruption and whatnot. And I think following the Musa Aman decision, there were a lot of doubts about how this case might proceed. And so now there, of course, commentators saying that the Perikatan government allowed for the judicial process to unfold, as it were, and did not hinder it. Do you think that Perikatan government now can claim, and its supporters can claim, that they are not against the anti-corruption agenda, that in fact they're there standing in very similar ways to what Pakatan Harapan stood for?
Yes and no. I think when we look, for example, at the issue of asset declaration, it's quite clear that this current administration is taking things slightly differently than the tack taken by Pakatan Harapan. Now we see ministers, being put into bandwidths of how much assets they have, whereas during Pakatan Harapan's administration, it was very clear what the amounts were. At the same time, I think I for one would say that this is one case out of many cases that is to come. Even Datuk Sri Najib, this is 7 charges out of 42. We have many other cases coming up for Datuk Sri Zahid Hamidi, Tengku Adnan, Ahmad Maslan, and a number of others. So just from one case today may not be representative of the entire process, given that even today the appeal process, of course, we have to see it through at the appeals court level and, of course, federal court level. So I am cautiously optimistic, but I don't think this completely says that the government is for anti-corruption in that way. We have to wait and see the process through.
Okay, so bearing that in mind, Fahmi, one case out of many, 7 out of 42 charges. Does this verdict change the political landscape in any way, in your opinion?
Absolutely. I think we've seen, for example, just before coming on air, I saw, on Dr. Sri Najib's Facebook, he was congratulating, if one could call it that, statement made by a minister, Khairi Jamaluddin. So, and then of course there was a statement by Hishamuddin Hussein.
Fahmi, are you referring to Khairi Jamaluddin's comment saying that loyalty of UMNO members should be to the party, not to the individuals? Is that the comment that you're referring to?
Yes, and there seems to be calls by certain leaders to move on. There was a statement by Dr. Zahid saying that they will make a very important political decision tonight, perhaps as we are speaking. So it'll be interesting to hear what Dr. Asraf Wajdi will say after this. But I think, given that the precarious position the Perikatan government is in, with a majority of 2, I don't think it's lost on Tan Sri Muhyiddin the impact of this verdict has on his coalition's perception of his leadership, and we see that in his statement. I read his statement as particularly diplomatic, attempting to calm the nerves and perhaps hold his coalition together. I don't know how successful that will be, and obviously this coalition, this is a test for Perikatan more than it is about whether Perikatan is for anti-corruption or not.
Fahmi, because one possible scenario, and this morning we heard after the verdict was given, calls for the dissolution of Parliament coming from supporters of Najib Razak. In the event that a faction of UMNO pulls out its support for the current government and seeks its fall, where do you think the Pakatan Harapan coalition will be? Does the Pakatan Harapan coalition want an election? Will they stand by Muhyiddin in order to thwart that particular attempt, or will they allow this government to fall?
Okay, so Pakatan Harapan has stated quite clearly that the state governments of Negeri Sembilan, Selangor, Penang, Sabah will not, our position is that it should not dissolve. Given the second wave that's coming, the numbers that appear to keep increasing in terms of positive COVID-19 cases each day, it is worrying. I think Chini was possible partly, really because the area of Pekan would have been a green area. But how do you run elections in Kuching right now when it's a red zone, right? And so for me, those who want dissolution and snap elections now are self-serving. They don't care about what the people are going through, whether it's about the economy, people are losing jobs, or about public health and safety with regards to COVID-19. And we already saw the DG of Health chastising those who were gathered without social distancing outside of the Kuala Lumpur court complex this afternoon. So we don't want Bosku super cluster to suddenly appear. So we want to avoid these kind of situations. I think the best, that's why in my speech in Parliament during the debates, I said that what's actually an important decision that we have to make as members of Parliament will be some kind of political reconfiguration in order for us to stabilize the government as well as move forward.
Fahmi, does this reconfiguration, as you put it, include supporting Muhyiddin Yassin's administration? Is that what you're talking about?
This is not a call for me to make. I think at this point in time, Pakatan Harapan's Presidential Council has given a full mandate to Datuk Sri Anwar to speak to not only members of the opposition, but anyone who will be aligned to the reform agenda. And I think it's his call to make, and also for Pakatan Harapan's Presidential Council to make a decision should that moment arise.
Is that a conversation that they are having among them?
I'm not in a position to comment on that.
Well, Fahmi, thank you so much for joining us tonight and speaking to us, especially during this time. We're going to take a quick break. More on the impact of the SRC verdict on the political landscape in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to consider this. Thank you so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Now, Datuk Sri Najib Razak was found guilty today of all 7 criminal charges for having received 42 million ringgit in funds from SRC International. This verdict makes him the first former Prime Minister to be charged and convicted in Malaysia. Now, we were scheduled to speak to Datuk Asraf Wajdi Dusuki, who's the UMNO youth head. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, he is unable to join us on the show tonight, and we were very much looking forward to speaking to someone from UMNO to find out how the party is digesting this verdict. But now, joining us on the line to discuss the significance of this verdict and its implications on future political dynamics, we have Professor Dr. Hamidin Hamid, political analyst at University Malaya. It's always good to talk to you. Good evening, Dr. Hamidin. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Now, how do you think this verdict will go down with UMNO grassroots? We were going to ask that question to Dr. Asraf Wajdi Dusuki, but then maybe you can help us understand what is your understanding of how you think this news will go down, this verdict will go down.
Hi, Melisa. Hi, Sharaad. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think, first, as a historian, I always say we experienced a historic day today. First, almost, I think, for the past 22 months, we collected many firsts in Malaysia, so this is one of them. And to answer your question, how the verdict today reflect and will be accepted or digested by UMNO, I think it depends on the areas, it depends on the groups, and depends on the situations where it is. I think it's very interesting in the bigger picture to see how does UMNO look at this matter, especially in regard to the coming slim PRK. I think this is something that we have to look at. That's the first thing. Second thing, in my point of view, that we have to look how UMNO leadership, especially at the PWTC and the MKT and others, look at the matter. You can see, in my point of view, so far from me and my team observation on the ground, the reaction is very much mixed. in my point of view, where some in the ground accepted the verdict and some also still blame the previous government, have a part and hand in the current verdict. So it's still a long way to analyze what is the impact of this verdict to UMNO. But it is clearly will chart a new landscape for UMNO as a party and to Najib Razak as a person and politician, and also to many other UMNO politicians.
Hamidin, can I just ask you, we all saw the photos of, the thousands of supporters, Najib supporters who turned up at court. I'm just wondering, is that indicative of the level of support that Najib Razak enjoys around the country?
I doubt that. I think from my personal experience doing research, and this is what we call in the stage, something that is happening, almost a kind of something that is tradition in Malaysian politics, especially in Malay politics. I think to show strength, to show support to the leaders, and this always happens. But to an extent that really reflect on the ground, I doubt. They have the same and similar strength and voice to support Datuk Sri Najib.
Hamidin, the one thing that perhaps Najib Razak has that is significantly different from many of the top leadership of UMNO today is that he represents a certain genealogy, right? The legacy of his father. And I wonder about that. I mean, do you think that in this verdict, there is possibly not just a disappointment, but also hurt, that somehow the dignity of the community has been impugned by this particular verdict, that not just in convicting this former Prime Minister, but convicting a man who represents a certain trajectory of modern Malay politics?
Yes, Gerard. I think this is interesting when we look, Sharaad, about Najib Razak as a person when we analyze his position in Malaysian politics. You are right, he represents one of the biggest names in Malaysian politics, the dynasty of Tun Razak. But in my point of view, if we look at the myth, what I say as a myth of what is happening now, you can see even in the beginning, when Najib called his slanders, politics slanders and others, when people are basically who support Najib argue that it's almost impossible for someone in that degree, from that genealogy, want to commit such a crime in Malaysia. But obviously, in my point of view, this gives a tainted situation to the family. And in fact, in my point of view, if you look for the past couple of years, it is a clearly a lone fight for Najib, rather than a genealogical or family cruising together with him in defending his action as a Prime Minister, especially in regard to YNDB and SRC.
Okay. Hamidin, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll come back and continue this conversation about the impact to the political landscape and delve a little bit deeper into that in just a couple of minutes. So stay tuned to consider this. Thank you so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Now we're speaking to Professor Dr. Hamidin Hamid, a political analyst at University of Malaya, about the political fallout following the conviction and sentencing of former Prime Minister Datuk Seri Najib Razak today. Hamidin, I'm just wondering, I came across a comment that I thought was particularly interesting. This was from former UMNO Supreme Council member Datuk Lumar Nur Adam, and he said, to quote him, "If not because of Najib, the current Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin could not have become Prime Minister." So, does the party, Hamidin, does UMNO blame the Muhyiddin government over what transpired today with the verdict? And could the possibility be, therefore, they might withdraw support for Muhyiddin's government?
Thank you, Melisa. I think the whole day today, especially after the verdict and sentences voted by the judge, everybody is waiting for a statement, especially by Zahid Hamid, to see what is the reaction of UMNO president on the verdict, and to some extent also to see what is the trajectory that's going to be taken by UMNO in regard to the matter. I think what has been said by Lumar Nur Adam, it is clearly some of the narrative that we know is happening on the ground among the UMNO leaders, especially when they want always argue that because of UMNO, the PN government is standing now, and especially for Muhyiddin, obviously. And for us, we are looking at a scenario where I think UMNO will strongly pressure PN government to get more benefit, especially if they want to dissolve the parliament in the seat negotiation and others. So, for me, the verdict today is not doesn't mean lost all for UMNO, but I think they will gain a lot more in pressuring Muhyiddin Yassin to kowtow to the line.
Hamidin, is UMNO a solid bloc? We've heard a lot of rumors about UMNO being factionalized around certain individuals, Najib Razak being well-resourced and therefore having the bulk of the divisional chiefs on his side. We hear of Hishamuddin Hussain faction, we hear of a Mat Hassan faction and various people, including Asraf Wajdi, aligning with that faction. Tell us, today, is UMNO one solid bloc? Is it likely to split up and reconfigure, realign itself because of this particular crisis moment?
Thank you, Sharaad. Thank you, and welcome to History of UMNO. In my point of view, this is UMNO. We're looking at. I don't think UMNO is usual. As usual, it is a party of warlords, you like it or not. I think, and this particular moment, at this particular time, the best faces of UMNO is represent. He's not the president, but Najib, especially in the protest against the PH government. He lead the charge. And I think that brings a lot of weight to Najib as a political leader within UMNO, even though he's no longer the president. So he has a lot of support. People are aligned to him. And at the same time, in my point of view, president is Zahid, but you can see throughout his presidency, Zahid is always, in my point, coaching Najib and many other leaders. And so too with Tomat. In the past 6 months, you can see, I think, Tomat as the deputy president always share platform together with Najib. So it is, in my point of view, to what extent this will create a loophole for UMNO leader to take the spotlight. It will be something that's very interesting to look at. Yes, in my point of view, the dynamic of UMNO political struggle, in my point, will continue. I don't think we can see a clear picture who is going to lead UMNO in the next future.
Okay, if I could just get you to delve a little bit deeper into that, because you're, in reference to what you said, that Datuk Seri Zahid Hamidi had said that the party, that UMNO will soon need to make, the political decision. I'm trying to think, what are those decisions? What exactly is it that UMNO needs to decide very soon? What are those? What is that conversation going to be like? Can you just perhaps allude to?
I think depends, Melisa. I think for the next couple of days, we can see if there is a strong wave of protest on the ground, especially among the leaders, among the warlords, that pressure PWTC to take action against the PN. But I mean, to go against Muhyiddin Yassin, I think Zahid have no other choice other than pull out. But it depends. But at the same time also, in my point of view, it depends on how Muhyiddin can play his strategy well to convince others that it is for their own benefit as a party to go. Because in my point of view, we know from our surveys, Ilham and others, that Najib does carry their own baggage. Okay, when it comes to the political situation, when it comes to the election. So in my point of view, as I said just now, UMNO must be very strategic to see to what extent they can really benefit in this scenario.
What about Pakatan Harapan and PKR in particular in this scenario? Do you see an opening for them to maneuver in such a way as to push forward their agenda and their leaders?
I think one of the biggest issues in PH now, in my point of view, is PKR. In the sense, I think yesterday, Lim Guan Eng and Muhammad Sabu issued a joint statement in regard to leadership, who's going to be the candidate for Prime Minister. In my point of view, and it seems that PKR is still pressuring that Anwar Ibrahim in some of that. But in my point of view, this is interesting. Where Anwar wants to carry PKR is still open. That's the way PKR is seeing it. But the AP and Amanah clearly mentioned that they will not work with other than Warisan and Don Mahathir team and working from that group. So this is a big dilemma for PKR. I think PKR definitely, looking at the situation now, have the good opportunity, okay, to create a new realignment, okay, among the political parties to form a new government.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We really appreciate your insights on this, Hamidin. Always a pleasure speaking with you. That's all the time we have on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching and good night.